The world is unbearably complicated, with 2 billion voices and everyone's thoughts thriving in equal importance, and everyone's claim on life as intense, and everyone thinking they were unique when no one was. One could drown in the relevance. This is the essence of storytelling. It is the art form of creating a voice that is worthwhile, relevant through the noise of billions of voices. Few authors capture this experience, usually sacrificing the art for the simple plot that attracts the masses, offering satisfying endings instead of meaningful insights with the power of changing one's outlook on life. Ian McEwan is different. He borrows from the traditions of British literature to create a literary work of art that transcends the mediocrity of popular fiction. Ultimately, McEwan sees writing less as a form of entertainment and more as a vector to directly communicate his precise ideas. In his World War II era novel, Atonement, he expresses this belief through the character of Bryony. A story is a form of telepathy. By means of inking onto a page, she was able to send thoughts and feelings from her mind to her readers. McEwan knows how to tell a story, drawing from his own personal experiences to immerse us in a historically detailed universe with deeply created characters. McEwan knows the art of storytelling. Early on, McEwan demonstrates his exceptional storytelling in Atonement, hinting his intention of exploring the use of perspective. He does this through the voice of Bryony when she struggles with the idea that everyone has their own conscious mind while she writes her own plays. Bryony need only show separate minds as alive as her own, struggling with the idea that other minds are equally alive. It wasn't only wickedness and scheming that made people unhappy. It was a failure to grasp the simple truth that other people are as real as you. Only in a story could you enter different minds and show how they had equal value. This idea that each individual had their own story of equal value is then used throughout the entire novel, immersing us in the world of Atonement by implanting us into the psyche of each character. Throughout the whole book, we are told through this omniscient perspective, with the convenience of knowing the exact intentions of the main characters, Bryony, Robbie, and Cecilia. McEwan exploits this to artificially create tension within the novel through dramatic irony, even centering his conflict around this technique. Bryony, an innocent teenager, attempts to understand the adult world throughout part 1 of the novel, desperately creating seemingly reasonable explanations to an otherwise confusing adult world. When Bryony reads a letter written by Robbie with Robbie's explicit sexual intentions towards Cecilia, Bryony starts believing that Robbie is a maniac, even though we know that Robbie had incorrectly sent the wrong version of the letter. Later, McEwan vividly describes Robbie and Cecilia consensually making love in the house's library, only to be interrupted by Bryony. However, Bryony, in her naive, imaginative mind, believes that she came just in time to stop Robbie's attack on Cecilia. It is only natural that when Bryony witnesses her cousin being attacked, she testifies that it was the maniac Robbie because of her baseless confidence derived from the events she witnessed without context. In Bryony's attempt at understanding the adult world, she blatantly misinterprets the intimate relationship between Robbie and her sister, causing the story to spiral into the wrong arrest of Robbie and his deployment into World War II France, a plotline which could not have had the same impact without McEwan's deliberate use of changing perspectives.
Continuing to demonstrate his art form, McEwan creates a surreal portrayal of the French retreat to Dunkirk during the Second World War in Part 2 of Atonement, using the stories his father told him as a child as his main source of inspiration. Part 2 of the novel chronicles Robbie's experiences during the French retreat, paralleling McEwan's father's stories about his route to Dunkirk as an infantryman. However, more importantly, McEwan uses this part to destroy the romantic illustration of war by highlighting the gruesome details of Robbie's experience. McEwan especially focused on the German airstrikes against the retreating force to illustrate the true condition of war, juxtaposing the traditional view of the brave soldier McEwan illustrates the fear that soldiers endured through the voice of the narrator. Each dive brought every man, cornered and cowering, to face his execution. When it did not come, the trial had to be lived through all over again, and the fear did not diminish. For the living, the end of a Stuka attack was the paralysis of shock or repeated shocks. In an interview, Ian McEwan reads a passage describing the ensuing chaos of the retreat and gives insight to what the actual retreat really was like.
The crowd pressed on. Men, tired of waiting, scrambled off the backs of the lorries. There was a shout of, "Take cover," and before anyone could even glance around, the mountain of uniforms was detonated. It began to snow tiny pieces of dark green surge. Nearer, a detachment of artillerymen were using hammers to smash up the dial sights and breech blocks of their guns. One of them, Turner noticed, was crying as he destroyed his howitzer. At the entrance to the same field, a chaplain and his clerk were dousing cases of prayer books and Bibles with petrol. Men were crossing the field towards a naffy dump, looking for cigarettes and booze. When a shout went up, dozens more left the road to join them. One group sat by a farm gate, trying on new shoes. A soldier with crammed cheeks pushed past Turner with a box of pink and white marshmallows. 100 yards away, a dump of Wellington boots, gas masks and capes were fired, and acrid smoke enveloped the line of men pushing forwards to the bridge.
He again used surrealist detail in his writing to achieve the same effect right before a Stuka bombing. She sat on the ground and hugged the boy tightly to her. She was speaking Flemish to him, soothing him, surely telling him that everything was going to be all right. Mama would see to that. Turner didn't know a single word of the language. It would have made no difference. She paid him no attention. The boy was staring at him blankly over his mother's shoulder. Including all these details allowed McEwan to effectively illustrate the dangers soldiers faced during the retreat. Essentially, McEwan chooses to include these specific details to take down the image of heroism associated with Dunkirk, instead of choosing to comment on the nature of war through his illustration of the emotional and physically brutality Robbie experienced. While McEwan's use of detail had the intention of developing his underlying messages, his descriptions ultimately made a lifelike universe, resulting in a more enjoyable novel. McEwan confesses that in order to create this effect, he did research at the Imperial War Museum, where he read letters and diaries of soldiers in the Western Front, containing details which helped McEwan shape the emotional defeat soldiers felt. Although McEwan used his research to create a historically accurate novel, much of the novel is derived from McEwan's own life, his personal experience manifesting itself in the essence of characters.
McEwan pulled from his life experience for many key points of the story, influencing his characterization for the protagonist, Bryony. He admits this in an interview with Howard Silver.
She was a kind of alter ego. I gave her some of my own childhood. And like Bryony, I was very much a creature of the imagination. And I began to think, well, what if the imagination is not just seen as a neutral matter, but what if one saw it as possibly rather destructive?
McEwan explores the inner workings of the imagination through Bryony as she struggles to understand the adult world while contemplating the fine line between right and wrong. Throughout all the moral conflict Bryony is presented, writing is the only thing that keeps her sane, giving her the small pleasure of using her imagination to fabricate an original story. Bryony's need to write is most apparent during the time she is a nurse. She was under no obligation to the truth. She had promised no one a chronicle. This was the only place she could be free. The reason why McEwan could so easily write about Bryony's love for fiction was because he was writing about his own love. McEwan's passion, like Bryony's, is writing. He doesn't just write to try to publish books so he can make money. He writes for himself. That's why he was surprised with how successful his book was, because he was shocked that anyone would want to read a book about writing.
And you're not going to sell many copies of this because it's mostly about writing and about the limits of modernism.
Although he was skeptical of how well his book would do, he still published it because for him, it was about the joy of writing. Atonement was simply written because he believes that we need the illusion of character and the onward drive of narrative. That is why he pulled so much from his own life to write this story. He wanted his own story to be told, but felt like he needed the essence of different characters and a narrative to make it intriguing. That's why Bryony is a manifestation of McEwen himself. Ultimately, McEwen's Atonement serves as an exceptional example of how novels can create intriguing storylines while still pushing the limits of storytelling. He implements the use of perspectives to implant us into the minds of each character, simultaneously using a combination of deep historical imagery with personal experience to create a fictional universe that we, the reader, become lost in.